Right. And he makes it. I definitely. Oh, good. If you get it. I got it. Heard your horse. Like we got trained. But I didn't know. Oh, for every way. Oh, they were in the way. They were there. So 8 of us, one person from the church, and then all the.
Oh, I said, yeah.
So, but they just did like the things on her.
Sounds like you look at this.
So you can find your piece.
Yeah, I had a, I
Where she walked around. So that was it.
I was researching.
So you could on the back. Yeah.
Waiting for a couple of the stragglers to come in. You know how those stragglers are. In the front row. That way, if I start getting a little fired up and start spitting, they're the ones getting it.
That's why we're in the second row now.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you guys used to be first row, and then you had to bring those Gallagher, bags so you wouldn't get the watermelon smashed all over you.
I got chairs up front. Don't be afraid of Dr. Chin guys up front.
Oh, he just said he's gonna spit all over the place.
I didn't give you like the Osho and like Vegas reading like the Harvard and sorry, we're out.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you do. I mean, you don't have to.
When you roll in late. When you roll in late.
Got it.
I roll in.
Feel it.
You're fine.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for coming back. So this is week 4 of our fun festivities together. And tonight is obviously something I hope that everybody gets as much out of it and as excited about it as I am to talk about it, because it's we obviously focus a lot on nervous system stuff here, but we're going to kind of, like I said last week, do a little bit more of a deep dive into how is it and does it impact our ability to fight off things and be healthier people. Okay, so if you remember from last week, so we kind of delve into more of the cancer stuff and how immune system and all that stuff is directly linked with that. Anybody have any thoughts or anything, questions or anything that we want to discuss before we transition into the next section? I can't believe that I did that good of a job that nobody has any questions whatsoever.
No, we're just excited about what's coming.
Oh, okay.
Not what was.
All right. So I hope the takeaways that you got from last week is more of an empowerment to say, there's no way that I would stand up here and say, hey, if I did 13 adjustments on you, you could never get cancer, right? That would be a foolish thing to say. But I do want people to understand that the better we're taking care of ourselves. So the goal is there's no such thing that could prevent all cancer from ever happening, because sometimes it just happens, even if we were trying to do a lot of good things, right? But I hope what you take away from it is to understand that there's that I can impact what the risks or chances are that I would ever get it, right? And that's really true with pretty much all of the chronic diseases. As much as people don't like responsibility in our country, we like to give responsibility to our doctors, We want to give it to our car insurance company, you know, or whatever. It's like anything that has insurance is basically because we really don't want the responsibility for it. And sometimes we're required to have it. Like if you own a car that has a loan on it, they require you to have it. But the bottom line is I think everybody would probably choose to have it most likely anyways, because if I accidentally hit somebody and caused $100,000 worth of damage, I'm glad that there's somebody that's got $100,000 that could pay them. That's not me, right? So, but in general, that's kind of the way our society is. So I want to just kind of use it as a way to stimulate people to understand that they're in control of their health in particular, and they can make better decisions for it. So, all right. The nervous system. So when we talk about the nervous system, it's broken up into different parts. So we look in general, we call it the central nervous system. So what makes up, does anybody know what makes up the central nervous system? Brain and spinal cord, okay? And then we also have something called the peripheral nervous system. And what makes that up? Yeah, so everything that's not brain and spinal cord. So once it exits the spine and it goes into the nerves that go around and tell our body what to do, that's considered the peripheral nervous system. Now, our central nervous system, which we're going to cover more in a minute, also is broken up into the autonomic which has parasympathetic and sympathetic systems. And then there's also the system that we can control, meaning like in our nervous system, if I do this, I intentionally told my arm to do this and to wave, right? But then there's a whole bunch of things that's being done under the autonomic system, which is, think of it as automatic. So it's things that I don't think about. For example, right now you're sitting here, you're not thinking about your heart beating, because if we had to think about all that stuff, we'd be thinking beat, breathe, digest food, and like if you fell asleep, it's bad outcome, right? Because you can't think of those things. So the autonomic nervous system is really what takes care of that stuff for us. And it's really what really runs and does all of the physiology for us body-wise, okay? And luckily, something's on board, which we call innate intelligence, and that runs all that stuff for us automatically, okay? So when we look at the biopsychology, so think of bio means life, and then psychology is the mental impulse stuff and how the brain works. And so within the field of biopsychology, we're really trying to figure out how does the brain really work and how does it impact the way the body functions. And although we've made great strides over the years with all of the technology things, with mapping brains and doing all these things, and we've learned a lot, there's still a lot that we don't understand about it. And I don't think, I don't want to say we'll never figure it out, but I think it's going to be very hard to figure out because this is not easy, simple stuff, right? It's very complicated. The amount of things that are going on in your body, if you really had a full grasp of the literally hundreds of millions of reactions that are going on in your body right now just to sustain you to be alive, I think everybody would literally just be walking around with their mouths open because they'd be awestruck all the time. But again, we don't worry about that stuff because it's kind of taken care of for us. So within the nervous system, understand that we have what's called afferent and efferent nerve traveling. So afferent is our sensory side. So when I touch my hand, there's nerves that go up to the brain and tell me that somebody touched me. And then I have efferent, which is the ones that are going back out to tell my muscles to move or to tell things to do stuff. And within that nervous system, we need to have both of those things working, right? I give people an example of, like, if I put something sweet on my tongue, so let's say I put sugar on my tongue, there's a receptor in my tongue that tastes sweet, right? And so immediately it's telling my brain that it's sweet because I tasted it. And then from that point, it's actually going to send information down the spinal cord, across the nerves, and it's going to tell, for example, the pancreas to start producing insulin because there's sugar coming and the body needs to be prepared for that. So there's a feedback loop system that's constantly going on in our body, and that's really for us to try to dive in and figure more about tonight. So does anybody disagree with the statement on the board or on the TV that the spine controls everything, right? Who's my example that I give everybody when we talk about spine controlling everything? Christopher Reeves, right? So when that guy fell off the horse and landed on his head, he damaged his spinal cord at the C2 area. And how did he function after that? he didn't, right? Like everybody knows he was a quadriplegic. He was in a chair. He had to drive the chair with a mouthpiece kind of a thing. But a lot of people didn't recognize that he was on a ventilator, that they had to put a pacemaker into his heart, that they had to push on his colon to make him go to the bathroom into a bag. So a lot of people didn't realize that stuff was going on unless they saw his chair and saw the little ventilator that was underneath his chair. And so the question that I always ask people is, when it comes to spine controlling everything, when he fell off his horse, I don't think he directly traumatized or injured his heart, his lungs, his intestines. Like he didn't directly injure those. What happened was he damaged his spinal cord. Okay. Now the brain would still want to. It's not that the brain said, you know what, I no longer have a desire to communicate with my organs. The brain wanted to communicate with its organs, but if there was something that made it impossible for that to happen, the organs just kind of did what they did. So it's not that his heart didn't beat, like maybe it would beat, but if I was having all of you guys do 25 jumping jacks right now, what would happen to everybody's heart rate? It would go up, right? Because it has to adapt to the activity. But if he was to do 25 jumping jacks, even though he couldn't, but if we were to exercise, his brain would have not been able to correlate to tell him like, hey, your oxygen levels are running low. We got to beat the heart faster to move blood so that you don't die, or your lungs wouldn't start breathing harder because it didn't know to do that. So there was a lack of communication happening within that system. Okay, so we have a saying that was first said by B.J. Palmer many, many years ago, and he says, nature needs no help, just no interference. And so that's really the way, when we look at our nervous system, the way that these things work. So when we talk about interference, we can talk about physical things, which we're going to talk about, but there's also chemical things that interfere. There's mental impulses that interfere. There's a lot of things that interfere with our bodies being able to express their full health. And that's something that as we're going through this, we're going to see, how does this impact this? Okay. So this focus of this is on immunity. And so a couple of weeks ago, we talked a little bit about the nervous system's role. And so I have this slide here for us to explain kind of what we're going to be covering, because I don't want anybody to think what we're talking about tonight is that I have done a study that shows if somebody has the flu or coronavirus, that I can do exactly 2.37 adjustments on them and they're cured. Okay, that's not what we're saying. Okay, so here's what we got. So on the thing, it says A equals B, or goes to B, leads to B. And then we know that B goes to C. So what is A? A is what an adjustment does. So, and then B is an outcome, meaning like we have studies that we're going to cover that shows that when I do an adjustment to the thoracic spine, that it causes a respiratory burst or an increase in phagocytic activity through your immune system. Shortly after that, 15 minutes after that, it increases the body's ability to fight off something, okay? And then we also have studies that shows that if I have increased phagocytic activity and immune function, that would then help us fight the flu or whatever virus or thing that we're dealing with, cancer, whatever it is. Now, the holdback that we have right now is that we don't have A to C studies. Okay, meaning like I don't have the study that says 2.37 adjustments cures the flu. Okay, now I could give you guys, I've been in practice for 20 years and I can give you guys hundreds and hundreds of anecdotal things, meaning that patients that have come into my office, they're suffering from XYZ, we do adjustments on them, and then they say, well, I've changed nothing else in my life. However, this is better. Like I no longer have this, right? And although there's that's good stuff. Unless you go through a scientific, rigorous process and you're doing specific case studies, or we have controls of, we had 100 people with ulcerative colitis come in, we're going to adjust 50 of them, we're going to do sham adjustments on the other 50, and then we're going to let it go for 6 months and we're going to see who's better. But we're going to control the other things. We're going to put them all on a similar diet, this or this, so that we can say, hey, the adjustment for sure is what cured, allowed the body, the adjustments don't cure anything. Let me back that up. We remove interference so the body can cure and heal itself, right? And that's the whole mantra. So all the studies that we're going to be covering over this next little bit are all things that are either that case study side of things that shows some effects, or how A equals B and then B equals C, okay? So this was a big one. So how many of you guys have heard of the flu influenza epidemic from 1917, 1918. Okay, if you haven't, you're under a rock with coronavirus, because this is the coronavirus thing is the next closest thing to the flu pandemic that we've had as far as severity of death and that kind of stuff. Okay, so interestingly, in the flu pandemic, they estimated that 20 million people died and up to 500,000 Americans died, which back in that time was a few more than our population's grown just a smidge since the early 1900s. Okay, so if we look at proportions, it would be, I don't know what it is, but it would be a couple million people dying from COVID kind of a thing, right? In today's numbers. And so the flu pandemic was something that they noticed during it, that there was different outcomes depending on what people did for treatment. Okay, so let's look at this next one. So researchers reported that in Davenport, Iowa, so Davenport, Iowa is where chiropractic began. It's the fountainhead of chiropractic. The Palmer School of Chiropractic is there, and that's where it all started. And so even back in these times, they had a huge clinic that took care of a lot of people in that area. Okay, so Iowa State, in Davenport, Iowa, there was 93,590 patients treated by medical doctors for the flu, and there were 6,116 deaths, so it equaled a loss of one patient out of every 15. Okay, now in Davenport at the Palmer School of Chiropractic, they adjusted 1,635 cases of the flu with only one death. Okay, so that's a big proportion difference, right? And then outside of Davenport, chiropractors in Iowa cared for 4,735 cases with only 6 deaths during that time. Okay, and so they started to notice that, and again, they didn't have research, right? But I would also be willing to bet most people, if you had family members that were really sick, and like the word around the street is like, hey, people that get adjusted don't die versus people that are doing the medical treatment. Probably what ends up happening is people start saying, well, hey, maybe we should go what? Get adjusted. It's like, what is about that? We don't know. Like, can't really explain it, but there seems to be a connection between people getting adjustments in the nervous system clear, and for some reason they live, right? And so that's the first one. So during the epidemic in Oklahoma, out of 3,490 flu patients under chiropractic care, there were only 7 deaths. So this wasn't an isolated incident. They went to different areas, and they seemed to kind of be getting these really nice, way better ratios than 1 to 15. This was a really important part of it. Furthermore, chiropractors were called into 233 cases that were given up on by the medical establishment. They said these people are going to die. They've hit the point, right? And they adjusted them and saved all but 25 of them. So there was one thing, I talked about this study years ago, and somebody brought up, well, probably people that went to the chiropractor, they just weren't that sick. They were the ones that had a mild case of the flu, and only the people who went to the hospitals had the severe cases of flu, which is why the numbers were so off. Now, I cannot, I didn't live back then, so I could not either confirm nor deny that there may have been a little bit of that, right? But if I do know this and say, hey, if I had 233 people where the medical people just threw their hands up in the air and said, hey, we did the best we could, it's not going to be long, get the, funeral arrangements ready, and we went in and adjusted them, and all but 25 of them made it through, that means something, right? Because that was the worst of the worst, right? These are the people that did not have, they had a very bleak outlook, and suddenly, again, didn't do anything magical to them, just remove interference, and then that helped the body function at a higher level, helps improve immune function, and now they lived, right? So pretty cool stuff. So immunity in the nerves. So this was a kind of a landmark study, and it wasn't all that long ago. It was in 1993, where they actually showed a direct relationship between nervous system function and immune system function. Okay, so they can prove that when your immune system or your body gets challenged, that there is a correlation with the nervous system activity impacting the immune system. Now, to me, it's one of those things that just makes sense, right? If the nervous system controls all function in the body, is immune system part of that function? Right, okay. Now, but for years, it was said, well, yeah, it can help with your back pain and neck pain and these mechanical type things. but you guys don't have a lot of clinical evidence that shows how it could impact the immune system. And I will tell you, in my 20 plus years of doing this, patients that are under care with us, especially our patients that have been under care for a while, across the board, I never have somebody who comes into me and says, before I started care with you, I got sick once every 13 years. And since I started care with you, about every 3 weeks, I seem to have something, right? I've never had that happen. I have it happen the opposite way, which is I used to be the person, like everybody knows that person who seems to catch everything, right? It seems like whatever they do, no matter what they do, they're catching it. And that person has come into my office and like, yeah, this chronic sickness, all this stuff. And through adjustments and our 5 essentials, suddenly they're saying, hey, listen, it's been a year and I haven't got sick yet. I actually just had this conversation last week with somebody who said, and he's a newer patient, and he's like, I've only been here a couple of months. He's like, but I was dealing with all of these things, and then like I've been here only 2 months, and all of a sudden all these things are improving. Do you think that has anything to do with what we're doing? And what was my answer?
Yes.
Well, I asked him. I'm like, what do you think? And he's like, and again, when somebody can tell me like, well, I've changed nothing else. I still eat my same cruddy food. I haven't exercised. Like I'm not doing anything else except for I changed this and I'm seeing improvements. Then there must be something to it, right? And so this was a great study done with 3,000 people. Talked about previously physical symptoms, including stiffness, low back pain, all of these things. But the bottom line is, most significantly, the incidence of colds and flu were reduced by an average of 15% in the large population who are undergoing regular chiropractic care. So there was a study that showed that people that got adjusted just did better than the rest of the population, okay? This was a great study done on manipulation in pneumonia. So 406 subjects aged greater than 50 that were hospitalized for pneumonia at 7 community hospitals were randomized using concealed allocation to conventional care. So they still got conventional care, okay? All subjects received conventional treatment for pneumonia, along with, there was some of them that received osteopathic manipulation, which is basically it's adjustments. We're a little bit more specific than the osteopaths. They do more generalized manipulation, but it's kind of the same concept, okay? Twice daily until discharge, they were able to, the cessation of antibiotics, respiratory failure, death, withdrawal from the study, the primary outcomes, so boom, results. Study found a significant difference between groups with significant reduction in medications, lung therapy sessions, duration of intravenous antibiotics, and respiratory failure or death when osteopathic manipulation was compared to conventional only, right? So that's pretty cool because pneumonia kills a lot of people in our country, right? It's actually what really kills most people. Like when people say they die of the flu, or even a lot of people that have died of COVID, didn't really die of COVID, they died of pneumonia, right? And so when we look at that and say, even if everybody did the same conventional treatment, but we just had somebody go in there and do adjustments twice a day on them, we would have way better outcomes with people leaving there with less medication use and a better recovery by just having them get adjusted, right? And so guess how many chiropractors have rights to go to hospitals and adjust sick patients? Yeah, I'm not aware of any. There probably is some somewhere in the country, but I know that it's not here, right? And it's like, and again, do we have 17 of these studies that shows this? No, we only have a couple that show this. But like, if I could improve outcomes for people without injuring them or causing harm to them, why would I not be willing to investigate more into that, right? And that's really what we're after with it. This was a great study that was done on HIV positive patients. So they took patients and they broke them into 2 subgroups, and they were measuring their CD4 counts, which is part of your immune cells, right? That get affected negatively with HIV, okay? So here was the result. So they did a 6-month period in the study. The group that did not receive any chiropractic care saw a 7.96% decrease in their CD4 cell counts, which means their immune system was becoming more compromised over time, okay? The group that received chiropractic adjustments increased a 48% CD4 cell count, which means their immune system was what? Improving in function. And so 48 plus 8 is really 56% almost improvement in outcomes when you add those two together with somebody who had HIV with their ability to have a stronger immune system and be able to fight off and survive things, right? So that's a pretty cool study, because we know, especially back, this study was done in the 90s when HIV was, it was like scary, right? It's like people are getting it and we have not a lot of options for them. Now we have pharmacological options that are at least able to kind of keep the retrovirus from replicating, and they can kind of control things with those. But even if we're doing that, do you think that person would still benefit from being adjusted? Right, because their immune system, they're still going to increase in function, the CD4 counts would, right? So this was the study that I referenced earlier. It was done by a PhD, Patricia Brennan, and she did a thoracic adjustment on people, so when we kind of push between your shoulder blades, and it caused a respiratory burst and increased immune and phagocytic activity, and they measured it at 15 minutes, and there was an increase that was better than it was before, and then it kind of faded over time, okay? There's another study that I didn't put in here that talks about the adjustment to the top bone in the neck, and it actually increasing what they call immunocompetence, which is how competent your immune system is to identifying and reacting to pathogens or bad things. And they found that it was 200% more immunocompetent after an adjustment. And this was somebody who was under maintenance care. So one of the things that I really hope, we have a study, and again, this isn't about this, so I didn't put it in here, but we have a study that shows, guess when the maximum benefit of chiropractic happens? Well, right after an adjustment, but I'm saying, like, at what point is it like your body's like, if you adjust me again, I can do no better? Like, never. Never is the answer. They've studied it, and they've shown that people that are under maintenance care just continually optimize and improve. It's just like it's all, they look at telomeres and all this stuff, and they find that people that are getting adjustment under maintenance things, which means that I'm not coming in, like, even we have a lot of our maintenance patients here tonight, and it's not that you never come in and you don't have a problem, right? It's not like you come in every day and you're like, man, I am living the dream. I've never had a pain ever since 3 years ago when I went through my correction. That's not how life works, right? Because we can't get away. The only way that would happen is if we all went and lived on the moon and there's no gravity, right? And then we don't have all these forces pushing on us. We don't have car accidents. We're not sitting at computers for 47 hours a day. All these things that are causing problems for us. And so the good news is that as we're under maintenance chiropractic care, part of it is to help you feel, good all the time, and hopefully have your body just adapt. But we talked early on a couple weeks ago that symptoms really aren't the enemy, right? What are symptoms? Well, they're letting you know, but it's actually the right thing for the body to be doing given a situation that you've given it, right? So if you go, if you had a costume party on Friday night and went against everything that the governor said not to do, and you had 20 people over, and you guys got a little bit tipsy, okay, and you woke up in the morning, you may have what? A hangover, right? And so that's a symptom of your body, and it's not because your body's like, man, I'm just going to do this to pee you off because you drank too much last night. It didn't do that. It simply said, listen, you overwhelmed my capability of processing alcohol, and as a result, I've caused all these chemical imbalances in you. You're dehydrated, your electrolytes are off, and when you wake up in the morning, how are you going to feel? Terrible, right? And so it doesn't matter what it is. We can use we can use a cold with runny nose or a cough. These are symptoms, and nobody likes symptoms. Nobody likes a hangover, right? Nobody likes coughing. Nobody likes sneezing. Well, there are a few weird people out there. My wife actually doesn't mind sneezing. I think that's weird. She's like, oh, it's just kind of a cool thing. But the bottom line is all of these things are symptoms, and it's actually an expression of health. It's your body doing the exact right thing for you. And when we choose to continually suppress symptoms, we're going to cause problems, right? Because the body's trying to accomplish something, and then we're going to say, no, body. That innate intelligence that's been with us ever since we sperm and an egg got together and created me and kept me alive all this time, it obviously doesn't know what it's doing this time, and I need to intervene, right? That's what we're saying. And then we're going to intervene with some pharmacological thing or whatever, and then that's, again, why everything that we know that's in that category has what associated with it? side effects, because those side effects are the body. If we call them side effects, they don't seem that important. Like, oh, no, it's just a little side effect, right? That's why they call them side effects. But the truth is it's what? It's an effect. So I got an effect of taking Advil and it made my headache go away, but it also affected my stomach lining and gave me a bleeding ulcer, right? It's an effect. It's not a side effect. If we just say it that way, it doesn't seem so important, right? So everything affects it, because once we interfere with one thing, we're going to create problems, okay? And it's true with our immunity and everything that we're talking about. So there is such thing as a normal position to the spine. And when we say the word posture, what happens most of the time when you're in a big group of people? Yeah, people sit up. You guys didn't. I was like, come on. No. But usually that's what happens. But when you watch groups, so if I'm in a big group and you say the word like how important is posture, you see everybody sit up. How long can they usually maintain that sitting up posture? Yeah, like 30 seconds if they've been working out, right? It's usually like as soon as they stop forgetting. And the reason why, honestly, is because when you force yourself to sit up, you're not using your posture muscles. You're using accessory muscles that are not designed to hold you up all day. Okay, it's like my bicep is a strong muscle, but if I ask it to hold a gallon of milk, in a flex position for 7 hours, it can't do it, right? It's going to fail. And so it's not designed to do that. We have our sprinters versus our marathon runners, right? Marathon runners have really good endurance. That's all of our posture muscles. And then we have sprinters, right? They lift heavy things and can be powerful, but don't ask them to do it a lot because they're going to fail, okay? And so our posture muscles need to be strong. And the only way that we talk a lot, especially when I go through my x-ray review, that poor posture leads to destructive life forces, right? How many of you guys have been to a nursing home before to visit somebody? Have you guys ever been to the nursing home and you're like, see somebody walking around like this? They're like, man, life is good. That's why I'm in the nursing home. No, what's everybody's posture? Everybody's bent over, right? They're on walkers and wheelchairs and all this stuff. And the truth of it is that it's not random who ends up in the nursing homes, right? There's something about this whole posture thing that seems to impact nursing homes in particular. And even if they don't have a chronic illness at that point yet, they can't take care of themselves anymore because of how bad everything is. And if they were to fall, they can't get up. So even if they don't have some chronic dementia or something that would normally put somebody in a nursing home, just the fact that they physically can't care for themselves anymore is a problem, okay? And so we have to stay focused on posture in order to have people do well long-term. So we know that there is something that's normal about posture. How many of you guys would like to have that x-ray?
Yeah.
Okay. And so it's important, like most patients that, people that aren't patients would be like, I don't know if I'd want that. I don't know what normal is, but you guys do, right? You know that we need to have a curve on our neck, and that's very important. There was a researcher. His last name is Brieg, B-R-I-E-G, and he did a bunch of studies on loss of cervical neck curve, and what does it do to the spinal cord. And he actually found that if we lose the curve and the head goes forward like that your spinal cord has to stretch up to 5 centimeters in order for it to stay, because like you can't, it's a longer distance. Like I use my hand, right? My hand, it's all loose on my palm, but if I do this, it stretches the skin. So as I lose the curve and the head goes forward, my spinal cord suddenly has to get longer. Well, last time I checked, you don't have like a little thing that's like adding train cars saying, hey, add 3 more cars because we're getting bad posture. So it physically stretches the spinal cord, okay? And that stretching of the spinal cord affects neurology and how things function in our body. And that's the reason why when you see everybody in the nursing home like this, that they're in the nursing home. Now, nobody that dies in the nursing home will have phase 3 cervical degeneration with 70 millimeters of forward head posture on their death certificate, right? It's going to be something like heart failure, whatever the disease was. But the question is, why did the disease get them, right? And that's what we have to look at. So the subluxation on x-ray, it's important, because not only do we have to have a curve this way, but how do we have to be this way? Straight, right? We need to be straight this way. They actually there's correlation studies that were done back in the 80s on scoliosis patients that found that people that have scoliotic curves above 30 degrees have a shorter lifespan, expected lifespan, than normal people. right? And showed up to 14 years less life. Okay. And so think about it, when we get scoliosis or we have those lateral curvatures, think of it as kind of kinking a hose, right? If I keep bending and kinking, it's not going to allow things to proliferate the way it's supposed to. And so it's very important for us to understand that we need curves here, but we don't need them here. And unfortunately, what we see most of the time is that curves are kind of like electricity. They say electricity is not created or destroyed. Energy just changed forms, right? So it went from heat to this, type of a thing. And so, and curves, they kind of found were the same way. If I've lost 30 degrees of curve here, if I look at full spine x-rays, I'll usually find 30 degrees of abnormal curvature somewhere else. Meaning maybe it's 5 degrees curve here, 8 degrees curve here, 12 degree here, or whatever. But if you don't have ligament damage and the integrity of the spine is pretty normal, they found that kind of it works that way. Okay. And so that's why part of the focus for us is to restore normal curves in this plane, is because we know that if somebody's got a wicked scoliosis and we don't help improve their curves the other way, then it's really hard for those to ever stabilize and do well. Okay. And so that's the reason why we use x-rays, because we can actually measure and pinpoint what we need to do to help people correct it. Ooh. There's something written right there in black. So this is a cool picture, right? Kind of looks like my picture I have on the wall over there. Yes. So the question is how do we get subluxated? So what do you guys think the primary cause of subluxation is? Okay. So thinking of it like acute trauma stuff, right? And okay, so that's the other version. So we have, they're all kind of trauma-y things, but physical acute trauma would be car accidents, slips and falls, that kind of stuff. And then we have what's called chronic repetitive traumas, which is sitting at computer desks for 12 hours a day, right? I think everybody will admit that we weren't designed as a species to be sedentary 60 hours a week, right? I think everybody knows that. And so when we force the body to do it, we're probably going to have some consequences to it, right? And that's part of what leads to those things. Now, my question is, when do you guys think the first subluxation occurs on most people? At the birth process, right? Because when they're pulling and twisting on the head, right? You got to turn the head to get the shoulders to pass. They've actually studied when they use forceps and stuff like that, that they can put upwards of 140 pounds of traction force on a baby's neck when they're pulling the baby out with those things. And I'm pretty sure that if I held a baby upside down and I hung a 440 pound weight off their head, that I'd probably be arrested, right? Like somebody would probably come get me, right? And I would hope all of you would come get me for doing such a thing, right? So why is it okay to do that same thing, pull and twist, and then not have it go well and not get checked and get adjusted afterwards? I had an experience very early on in my practice with a baby who was a hard delivery, had a subluxated neck, went to the hospital with a colleague of mine. It was his patient, and they had diagnosed the baby with failure to thrive syndrome. Okay. Which basically, anytime you hear the word syndrome after anything, means that they don't know, right? So it's like a group of symptoms. We don't fully understand it, but there's not a whole lot, like it just is, right? Now, that's not always 100% true, because like Down syndrome, they know what's causing it. It's a trisomy. But we also know that Down syndrome, we can have somebody who has Down syndrome that's very high functioning and doesn't have a whole lot of deficits from it. And then we can have somebody on the extreme end who can never possibly ever do anything. They have to be under 24/7 care all the time, right? So that syndrome is still a syndrome because there's no set thing that says if I put an extra gene in here, you're going to have these 7 things, right? And so failure to thrive syndrome, if you look it up, basically means that your baby's probably not going to make it, right? Like they don't have the ability to thrive. And so we're at in the NICU, and I'm broadcasting this live, so I'm probably getting arrested, but oh well. No, so we go into the NICU, and when we go to the hospital, we don't have rights to perform adjustments at the hospital, kind of a thing. And I didn't perform the adjustment, so I guess I can't get in trouble. And as long as I don't disclose his name, we're okay. But so we go to the hospital, and the baby's hooked up to all these monitors and machines and stuff like that. The mom's a young mom, first time mom. She's kind of freaking out because, you know, who wants to get the thing that your baby has failure to thrive syndrome and probably won't make it, you know, kind of a thing. Nobody wants to hear that. So she actually says when we're talking, she's like, you know, I heard a pop when they were pulling on the baby. And she asked the doctor what it was. And the doctor's like, oh, don't worry about it. It happens all the time, right? And it probably does. I'm not saying that it doesn't, right? But bottom line is first APGAR score was like a 5, and then it's supposed to go up, right? When you do your second one, well, the first one was a 5, and then it goes to like a 3. That's code for get this baby to NICU. We got problems, right? So they rush the baby away. So we get there, the baby's in NICU, have all hooked up to all these things. And my friend was assessing the baby's neck. And with babies in particular, that atlas bone that we have, it's got really big transverse processes. Now, you can't feel them on you very well because we all have big muscles around our neck. If you lay down on your back and you push in right behind your jaw, right below your ear, you'll feel the tip of it. But on babies, they don't have that muscle, and so it's very prominent. You can feel it very easily. And when he pointed at it, and there was literally looked like there was like a little bit of a pencil poking out in the skin on one side, but it wasn't on the other. And so when we adjust babies, most of you guys have seen us adjust babies in here. We're not doing these huge violent moves on them, right? So and normally when you adjust a baby that small, that doesn't even make a sound. It's just literally like it just slides into place type of a thing, and it's fine. But this one actually clunked. So he's pushing and kind of bending the head, and all of a sudden you hear this little clunk. And then within seconds, the monitors go off. And so like then the alarms, you know, like the nurses come running, which is not what we wanted. But the mother was great, fought on her feet really quick. And the nurses come over and they're like, what's going on? What's going on? And then mom was just like, I don't know. We've just been praying over my daughter, praying for intervention and healing for my daughter. And all of a sudden, like, I don't know what happened. So they're watching, and all of a sudden, oxygenation rates are going up. Heart rate is coming down. All of these things start to change, right? And this girl graduated high school like 6 years ago. And I get a little choked up talking about it because I think about if that lady wasn't a patient in his office and didn't understand chiropractic and what chiropractic could potentially do for that baby, then what happens to the baby? Baby likely dies, right? But how much intervention did it take? It took that, and the baby thrived as a result. Okay, and so you know, when I was very young when this happened in practice, and I was thinking, there's got to be a chiropractor in every delivery room, in every NICU, like everywhere, in every hospital. Like there just has to be. And then they've done studies that shows in Australia, did a study with 500 live normal births, no forceps, nothing crazy. And over 90% of the babies were subluxated in the upper part of their neck from normal delivery, right? And so, like, how is this not a thing, right? Like, we know that this is a problem. We've done some studies that showed it was a problem. But when you just get dismissed that it's had no impact on anything, then people are just like, it's not a big deal. We've got medical intervention. We'll keep that baby alive. We'll do whatever we got to do. And the problem is that it doesn't have to be that way. Like, let's just remove interference and allow the body to do exactly what it's supposed to do, right? And the body's designed to thrive. That's what it's supposed to do, okay? And so we dove in a little bit last week about sympathetic and parasympathetic. So who remembers what the sympathetic system does for us? You guys sleeping?
I am.
Yeah, I see that, Jacqueline. Yeah, we got somebody getting ready to pour some water, ice cold water on you. Wake you up. So anybody remember? So sympathetic system would be if I pulled out a big knife and I had scary eyes and I'm going to come chase you down, right? Or we just got through Halloween. So if you went through a haunted house or something and the guy with the chainsaw comes after you, your sympathetic system is kicking in, right? Because you got to either beat up the guy with the chainsaw or you got to run, okay? Always go with somebody slower than you. That way you don't have to be that fast, just faster than them, right? So bottom line is that sympathetic system is our fight or flight system, okay? And then we have our parasympathetic system, which was the what? The non, yes, yeah, yes, it's the antithesis of that, which is our rest, digest, and heal nervous system, okay? So you're gonna get asked this next week, and somebody better have the answer, or else we're all doing burpees, okay? So be prepared. Now, so we talked last week a little bit about there needs to be balance between the two, right? So when your alarm goes off in the morning, it's very normal for your sympathetic system to have to wake you up, right? I gotta get up, I gotta get moving, I gotta get to work, I gotta get through my day. But there are periods throughout the day where I'm at lunch, and if you're doing the right thing, then you're taking a lunch where you actually get to eat and you get to have a little bit of peace and quiet for some time. You're not the person who's eating their lunch at their desk because they have deadlines and they're typing on the computer. Because now, here's the problem. We have a lot of digestive issues in this country. Does everybody agree? Like, just go, talk to the Tums people, right? And so a lot of digestive issues, and not that all of them are caused by this, but just think about this. So I'm eating food, I'm stressed out, typing on my computer, I'm trying to hit deadlines, I'm in a sympathetic state, I'm putting food into my body, and what does my body think about that? Like, why are we doing this? We're under stress, we're getting chased by a big grizzly bear, and you're thinking it's a good time to sit down and eat a little snack, right? And so the body is not in a state where it's really ready to eat, right? Where it wants to digest food, it wants to secrete your digestive juices and really get things going. So we're in this sympathetic state, we're putting food in, and this stuff isn't going well, and then what do we all get? Indigestion, I got heartburn, my stomach's upset, I clear a room every time I bend over, whatever, right? So there's these things that start to happen to us, and we're wondering, why is this all happening? Well, part of it is our choices that we're making, because we make bad choices and we're eating in a sympathetic state, right? So we need to have, it should be mandatory for everybody to have an hour lunch, okay? But even if it's not, and you only get a half hour, do yourself a favor and actually take the half hour. Don't say, if I take an 18-minute lunch, I can get off 12 minutes early. Okay, it's not worth it. And so take the time that's allotted to you and actually enjoy your meal, de-stress. It's not a good time to get on and watch political ads and watch everything that's going on right now. So that's going to make you more stressed, right? So de-stress during that period. And then when you get home at night and you're eating dinner, from that point forward, we should be in a more parasympathetic state, right? The day is over. That's why it's really important to work out any family issues that you got going on, because you don't want to come home from a busy office where it's all stressful, come home and then I'm in a stressful relationship at home, right? So it's important for us to work on those things. And when we have balance and unity between those systems, your body's going to thrive, okay? The number 2 thing in our office that gets reported within the first couple of checkpoints that we do with people, one is decreased pain. They're getting adjusted, their inflammation is dropping, their pain reduces. But what do you guys think the number 2 thing that gets reported in our office as far as improvements go? It probably happened to a lot of you. That one is up there, but it's not the one I'm looking for. Sleep. Okay, Jim said it. Better sleep. Across the board, the second most important, or the second thing that gets reported to people is, I have less neck pain and I'm getting better sleep. Okay. And the reason why is because that top bone in the neck controls a lot with the parasympathetics. And it's also what triggers headaches and all these other terrible things. So when we adjust that and we get reduction of interference there, the parasympathetic system can do its job and you can actually get into deep, restful sleep. Okay. And then you wake up and you actually feel somewhat more revived. Not Jacqueline tonight, but she didn't get good, restful sleep last night. Somebody was chasing her with a bear. Okay, so the bottom line is these things are important for us to understand, and it's the reason why we ask our patients to be committed to taking care of their spine. So we have a saying in our office, it's like, once we're done through the correction process of helping you fix your spine, then what's our job? Keep it that way, right? Like, there's nothing that's going to prevent it from potentially starting to come back, because we live in a world with gravity and all those things. So we want to help you keep it that way, because a better functioning spine and nervous system is always going to lead to better health outcomes for you. Okay. All right. So as we transition into nutrition for the spine, so all these things are going to still be dealing with this. I want to focus on something called the microbiome, which we talked a little bit about early on. Okay. Does anybody know can anybody tell me what a microbiome is? Okay, yeah. So it's a biological environment, all the bacteria and the viruses and the parasites, whatever is it, like, it makes this thing up, right? And it's normal for us to have a whole ton of bacteria and viruses and all that stuff in our biome, right? So how does this affect nervous system function? So the number one thing that I talk to people about is, do we have a big problem with depression in our country? Yeah, even though we live supposedly in the best country in the world, we're the wealthiest, we have the best of all these things, we are also by far the most depressed country in the world, which doesn't make sense, right? If it was about, like, people that are depressed think if I just had more money and more of this and more of this, I wouldn't be depressed. It's not true, because we have all of those things. Maybe you don't individually, but as a country, we have all of the opportunities for those things, and yet we're still the most depressed country in the world, okay? Well, you guys have heard the neurotransmitter serotonin, okay? So the drugs that they give you, like Paxil and Prozac and stuff like that, those are called SSRI, serotonin reuptake inhibitors, okay? And part of their job is to prevent serotonin from getting taken back. So the way the nervous system works is one nerve is here and it throws serotonin into a synapse, and then there's a nerve ending here and it hits it, and then it activates that nerve and tells it to do something, right? So the idea behind serotonin reuptake inhibitors is when the nerve sends the serotonin, it would normally sit in the synapse for just a short period of time, and then it reabsorbs back into the nerve that it came from as kind of a little bit of a recycling thing, right? And so they found initially, or they thought they found, that if I give you a drug that prevents that reuptake, then the serotonin sits in the synapse longer, it'll fire that nerve a little bit more, and it'll make you feel better, okay? So that's the concept, okay? Now, they've never proven that they actually work, but that's a whole other story. That's not for tonight. Now, here's the deal, though, is does your body adapt to new things? Yes. So if it wanted 3 serotonins in there for 3 seconds, and you put 7 in there and keep them in there for 20 seconds, over time, do you think that nerve that's on the other end is going to adapt and say, I don't want that. I only wanted the 3 serotonins for 3 seconds. You're giving me 7 for 10 seconds, which is why these things become ineffective, right? So even the people that say they're experiencing benefits, pretty soon they're now messing up their serotonin levels in their body, and now they're starting to have manic episodes, and now they're like, well, not only are you depressed, but now you're bipolar. So don't worry, what do we have for you? A new medication to help you with your bipolar stuff. And then when you're bipolar for a while and you're on these medications, it causes you to have a chaotic, psychotic episode where you just kind of go off the deep end. And now they're like, oh my gosh, you have psychosis. So now I'm going to put you on an anti-psychotic drug, okay? And it just kind of spirals out of control, right? And it's all started mainly, why do we bring this up? Because where's most of the serotonin made in your body, in your gut microbiome, okay? So if our guts are all tore up and nasty and we're gassy and bloaty and we're not doing good things, then what are the chances that we're going to have normal serotonin levels in our body? Very small. And taking one of those medications is never going to fix the cause of the problem, because the last time I checked, Paxil isn't helping to repopulate microbiome, right? And so we have all these things that get challenged, and instead of looking for cause of problem, we look for treatment of symptom, okay, which is a different thing. And as a result, it causes us to lose function in our bodies, okay? So repopulating and making sure we have a good microbiome is a very important thing. Now, taking probiotics, we talked about earlier that there can be some good things with that, and we offer some probiotics here. But what did we talk about being the best source of all that stuff? Real foods, and being where? Outside. Okay, we're breathing in these things. You know, remember we talked about, they said when you pull a carrot up, you get like blasted with all of these microbiome things that you inhale that go in, and it's actually way better for you working in the garden and working in the dirt than it is to even take full probiotics, right? Because you're getting a whole different variety of things, because the ecosystem is very different and structured in these different plant environments, right? So again, not telling you to, to go around and like eat cow manure or something, but it's like, it's those different ecosystems that get built in those things that help us to develop a good biome so that we can have a strong one. Now, when we talk about the toxins, toxins do what to our microbiome as well? They destroy it, okay? And we also know that there are neurologic toxins. So, for example, the artificial sweeteners, the pink, yellow, and blue packets, those things have been shown to be neurotoxic, meaning that they go in and actually cause problems with our nerve cells, okay, the chemicals that are in them, Okay. And that's not, I'm not just picking on them because there's a lot of additives and preservatives that, MSG is an excitatory thing. And red dye, like if you have a kid who has ADD and you give them MSG with some red dye, you better, hold on, right? This is going to be a bad ride for a bit for most of them, right? Because these things are super stimulating to their brains that are already in a hyperstimulated state, right? And so now they're, and that's why when they do those things, we talked early on about doing the poop transplants and all that kind of stuff in people, and you change their microbiome, you change behaviors, you change function in their bodies based off of the bacteria that they have in their gut. Okay.
What is sugar? Is it a toxin or an inflammatory agent?
Kind of both. And really, like if you're eating like cane sugar, like if you were in Hawaii and you just picked a piece of cane sugar and you chewed on it, that's not necessarily going to be toxic as if it didn't have a bunch of toxins on it. The toxicity with sugar comes with the refinement process and the like high fructose corn syrup, what they do to it is more of where you're going to get a lot of the toxicity from. Okay. Even just plain white sugar has been majorly processed to make it the way that it is. Right.
Are all toxins inflammatory?
For the most part, yes. I don't have a 100% saying like these two toxins don't cause inflammation. My general rule to you is yes, they're going to cause problems because toxins are not good for our body. And if it gets into the body, one of the ways that the cells protect themselves is through an inflammation process, right? If I inflame my cell, bad things can't get in, right? Okay. All right, so what are some of the common things that we need to look at when it comes to toxins? Cosmetics are a big one. There's that thing that was done on, I can't remember the name of it was one of those investigative news channels, and they were talking about like the average woman before she leaves her home puts like 127 chemicals on her skin before she leaves. If she gets up, takes a shower, uses shampoo and normal conditioner, uses body soap or body wash, and she's putting on foundation, makeup, and then she spritzes a little perfume or whatever it is. It's a ton of chemical toxins that are going onto the body before they even walk out the door. Okay. And so we have to be very cautious with those things. The one thing that I will say that I've noticed, if we look at the benefits of COVID, is that women are not doing that as much. Like I've noticed, like people are coming in au naturel way more often than when before, right? And I think it's a lot of them because they're working from home and, and they have the little, Flintstones, or not Flintstones, the Jetsons little thing that they put on if they gotta get on a Zoom call that makes them look nice. No, little fake faces. But for the most part, people are not doing that stuff because they're not having to be quite so, out there to do that. So I can look at some positives there. Household cleaners are really important. That's why we give every patient, if you're a patient in our office and you've started, you have a list of chemicals to avoid in household cleaners, and you also have a list of things that you need to be looking for to buy and or looking to make yourself as far as your cleaners go, right? We don't give that stuff so again that it lays curled up on the floor with footprints on it in your car. We give it to you so you can use it as a resource to help yourself minimize toxic exposure. All right, mindset's a big one. And what I really want to focus on tonight is this next slide. Would you guys agree that in general, especially in the United States, that as we age, we're expected to get sick? That you're almost like a freak of nature if you're not the sick person, right? But yet when we talk about those tribal communities, the Hunsins and all those people that live to be over 100 years old, and what are those people still doing? They're still herding sheep up mountains and they're still doing stuff, right? And so in those cultures, you're the oddball if you lost vision, right? So these people, like, nobody wears glasses over there and they're all 80 years old. They're not even wearing cheaters, right? They just don't need them because why? They've been in a healthy, non-toxic environment doing things the right way for a long time. Okay, so we have to change the mindset because it becomes too easy as we age to say things like, well, I used to be able to do that, but now that I'm older or now that I'm this, I can't do those things, or I don't, like that. And that's a mind trap for people to get into because once we stop doing things, the wheels come off the bus, right? There's not too many people that went from being super active and healthy They went through a period in their life where they kind of let the wheels come off the bus and things went bad. And then somehow they find the inspiration to try to undo it, right? Not that it doesn't happen, it's just not common, right? And that has a lot to do with habits and behaviors that we learn during those unfortunate bad times, right? So we have to change our mindset that says, I'm going to be 80 years old and have all my faculties and do all the things that I still want to do. And the only way I'm going to do that is that whatever age I am now, I better get serious about what? My health and doing stuff, right? Because it doesn't happen any other way. It's not like there's some genie that's going to come out and say, I'm going to give you that, right? So the bottom line is we are self-healing, self-regulating organisms. That innate intelligence is on the job and it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do, the right time, every time for you. And there's nothing else that needs to be said about it. It never does anything to harm you. And so if we continually treat our body well and do the right things, there's only one outcome to that, and that's improved function and health, right? So no matter what we find in the world of infectious diseases and all of these things, our immune system, our body is just going to function better as a result of taking care of it, okay?
So this is the proper mindset?
Yes. Yes. Okay. Now, oxygen and exercise. I just had a nice conversation with a patient today. We were talking about, she's like, so how does oxygen and exercise help me with XYZ problem that I'm having? And so part of it is oxygen important? So that's a no-brainer, right? We talked about that last week or 2 weeks ago. We need to have oxygen in our cells to keep them healthy. As part of cancer, right? Cancer can't live in oxygenated environments, so there's a lot of good things there. But the other side of exercise is that it causes lymphatic system to move, right? If you're somebody who says, I go on a car trip for 12 hours, what happens to my feet? They get all swelled up, right? And that's because the lymphatic system is not working well, because the lymphatic system is a passive system. It doesn't have a heart to pump things through the lymph. It needs you to do what? Move. As I'm moving my foot, I'm contracting muscles. It's squeezing and it's pushing lymph up my leg, right? So if I sit in position for a long time, it doesn't usually happen when you're like 10, but once you get a little older, suddenly that the lymph is starting to pool in your legs, and then you start getting the swollen legs and stuff like that. So we want people to make sure that we're moving, because lymphatic system is how the body gets rid of its waste products. Like cells dump their waste product into extracellular fluid. That extracellular fluid eventually gets worked around and gets worked into the lymph system. So then the lymph system eventually dumps it into your blood, and then your blood takes it to your kidneys and your liver and all that stuff to filter it and get it cleaned out of there, right? But it's a very important system. And if our lymph system is all backed up and cruddy, then how well do you guys think your immune system can work? Because your lymph system also has macrophages and these things. You get lymph nodes, right? And they get swollen in your neck if you get an infection. So these are immune things that are trying to help your body fight off something, but yet people aren't moving. And so their lymph system is not moving fluid the way that it's supposed to, okay? Sitting versus standing. So research has found that the average person sits 6.5 hours per day currently. Okay, it's the average, because we still have people that are on their feet all day, right? And so they put out a thing about 5 years ago that they said sitting is the new what? Smoking, right? Sitting too long has such a negative impact on your physiology and your body that it is the equivalent of you smoking a pack of cigarettes every day. And everybody knows that's not good for us, right? And so this is a big problem when we start looking at long-term health outcomes and physiology. And so everybody has one of these at home? Okay, you should. And so, using your wobble disc, not just to do wobble for your spine, but it's a great exercise tool as well. Okay, it works on balance. If you're a person who is like afraid of falling or this kind of stuff, I don't recommend, if you have that you blow it up really high and you try to stand like this first time. Okay, make sure you have something to hold on to. But the bottom line is that when we're doing those balance activities, when we're doing little squats on them, we're getting so much more benefit out of that, because the instability neurologically is firing your nervous system way better, and it's going to help you. They've done studies to show, even like people in nursing homes, they had them do a study where they had little lights on, like a little dance mat thing, and when the light flashed, they had to pick their toe up and touch the the place on the mat, and they had them do that for, I think it was like 6 weeks. And the people that did that versus the people that didn't, their risk of falling, all stuff went way down because they just were increasing their reaction time. Because let's face it, everybody's walking along and sometimes you get one of those crazy things, right? The question is, when the carpet snake gets you, are you going down or can you recover? Okay, if you're going down, it's because that reaction time isn't there. And how can you increase that? You can increase that through doing balance activities. Okay, so part of your homework tonight, you're going to get a sheet that has the stuff that you can be doing with the wobble disc to help yourself keep moving forward. So joints are where two bones meet. And it's interesting, when you talk to people that have arthritis in their joints, they will constantly, like, one of the limiting beliefs that they have is that and I understand why they have it, because if you have arthritic joints and you move your joints, what do you feel? Pain, okay? But every study that's ever been done on arthritic joints shows that if I continue to move them in correct manners and do good things, what happens to the joint pain? It gets better, okay? But it doesn't mean it's not going to suck for a while. No, it's going to suck for a while, right? The joint's not working right and it's got some inflammation things. But again, if we're doing better diet things, we're making better choices, we're keeping inflammation levels lower, guess what doesn't hurt quite as bad? My arthritic joints. Okay, so there's a reason why it's 5 essentials and not 1, right? Where you have all these things working in combination to help us. Okay, we do have a joint health supplement to help with the cartilage. It helps to rebuild some of that hyaline cartilage. And again, I know a lot of our patients say they take the collagen supplements and stuff like that. These are all good things, and the fact that we have to reorder those ones as much as we do means that, guess what? People feel the benefits of it, right? Otherwise, they wouldn't keep buying it, right? So the point of it is that those are great and they can help you with that. But what's the best thing you can do for yourself to keep it good? Exercise, movement, okay? And that's what it comes down to. So this is our final little BJ Palmer quote. He says, medicine is about disease and what makes people die. Chiropractic is about life and what makes people live, right? And because in medicine, they're studying the disease process. And there's a saying that whatever you focus on, you get, right? So if I'm focused on disease all the time, what am I likely to get? Disease. And if I focus on health and healthy lifestyle and healthy things, what am I likely to get? Health as a result, okay? All right, so next week, we're gonna do a deeper dive into nutrition and detoxification. So you guys, if anybody has questions, we can answer questions. If not, make sure you meet up with your team captains, get your homework, make sure you got your stuff turned in. And don't be afraid to post things on is everybody on the Revive Tribe thing on Facebook? Okay, so don't be afraid to post stuff on there. There's some people like Leslie who's doing a great job and she posts little things on there, and she even posted like, hey, I didn't have such a great week because all these people kept bringing me junky food, you know? And those are good things, because you know what? There's somebody else that was going through that and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm glad I'm not the only one. And what did Leslie say? I didn't miss my workout. I didn't do this at night. You know, like, I did the best job I could given the situation I was in. And that's really all we're asking for people, because nobody's perfect, right? And you know what I had the other day? I had pizza. Right? No. Yeah, and it was the really good garlic crusted one and stuff like that, right? So it's okay. I don't do it all the time, but every once in a while it's okay, right? And people need to know that, because they're doing it too. And not that we want to just have a group of saying, hey, let's all just be as bad as we can. But you need to know that it's not about failure as long as we learn from it and we move forward from it, right? Like, I learned from it and I'm going to do a better job. The next time, Leslie's probably thinking, the next time I know when all these evil people are going to come and bring me donuts and stuff, I'm just going to pack food. I'm going to make sure that I'm ahead of the game, and I'm going to try to avoid eating too much of it, right? And that's just a better decision than what happened this last time, right? So that's what it's about, okay? So be involved on the Revive Tribe page, because that's what it's there for. Get questions answered, all of those things, because the more activity we have on that, the better off it's going to be as a community, okay? All right. You guys are good to go? Great.
Thank you.
Who, if you can raise your hand, who is not on the Revive Tribe?
Oh, Bill.
Okay.
Oh.
Well, yeah.
What is the internet?